Module 2, the interviews. We've now completed the job search phase, which means we've calculated the exact number we'll ask for, our reach, our goal, and our walk away. We know how to bring recruiters to us without having to fill out job applications and create endless cover letters. And we know how to create leverage in the negotiation. If you don't, go back and watch those videos and then head over to the interview phase. In this module, we'll walk through the single most valuable negotiation tool, to speak or not to speak, do we put out the first number, how to uncover the need, and the breadcrumb method. Lesson 1, the single most valuable negotiation tool. So tell me about yourself. This is how nearly every interview you will ever have will start. Within the first 5 minutes, the person will sit down, maybe they'll scan your resume, and then quickly ask, so tell me about yourself. This is when they're actually handing us the ball and they're saying, tell me what you want me to know about you. This is not the time for us to read off of our resume. This is not even the time for us to tell them what we do in our current day-to-day job. Let's walk through how we deliver our value narrative. In order to build our value narrative, we start with our accomplishments. And I don't mean in the last few months. I want you to sit down, clear some time to think of every key accomplishment in your professional career that are at all applicable to this role. Even those that may not be. Go ahead and get them down on paper. Jog your memory. It's hard to remember these things. So look back at old emails, old performance reviews, old LinkedIn posts, anything where you were telling the world what you did or where the world was commending you on a job well done. Those can be helpful reminders to look back. It's hard to remember anything after 6 months that you've done. But there are moments that reasons you've gotten promoted, reasons you've gotten previous jobs. What were those? Try and write those down, and we want to quantify them as much as possible. The next stage is now pull up your future roles job listing. I want you to list out the roles and responsibilities, all of them. And as you read through these, you should begin to see a pattern. You should begin to see that if you had to bucket this job listing into 3 categories, what would those be? You can look at doing it in a few ways. Maybe you'll bucket them by the 3 primary deliverables for this role, or the 3 primary cross-functional partners you'll work with, or maybe the 3 skills that you'll leverage most often. How could you take this long list of roles and responsibilities and condense it into 3 core categories? There in the middle lives our value narrative. When we can begin to tie our key accomplishments that often are quantifiable, have quantifiable results, back to the category of our future role. Therein lies our value narrative. Let me walk you through an example. I pulled up a role for a product marketing manager, a role I'm familiar with and have done before. The job listing had work closely with product management as a strategic voice, launch new messaging, content, and training that sets up the go-to-market team, also known as a sales team, for success, and own competitive analysis or positioning for analytics competitors. That was specific to this particular company. There were other bullets that sounded pretty similar to this. I pulled out these as primary examples, and I found that I could categorize all of the roles and responsibilities of this job into 3 categories. I chose cross-functional partners, being working with the product team, the sales team, and the voice of the market or the customer. I could then look to my accomplishments list that I always keep handy and find what were examples that I could match up to these categories. I'll walk you through a few. I chose very basic examples. Launch Acme Co.'s flagship product. I led sales kickoff where positioning pricing for all new products was announced. That was for the sales team. And launched Acme Co.'s inaugural customer advisory board, proving I know how to manage the voice of the market function. Now, ideally, these would all have quantifiable results. I increased sales by X%. I launched it in 40% of the time from previous launches. However I can quantify those, I want to pull those in to prove not only did I do them, but they were successful. So what this is doing, this is actually not pulling what my day-to-day job was, but rather where were the times that I in particular was able to shine. So that is my value narrative. So how does this look in an interview? Instead of responding to, so tell me about yourself, by reading from my resume or telling them what my current day-to-day job is, what I would instead do is say, it may be most helpful if I walk you through how I've worked closely with product, sales, and the market, since I believe that's a primary function of this role. Would that help? And now I'll walk them through not just what I do, but the core moments where I was able to shine. And that's what I want them to take away from this. I want them not to hear what I've done on a day-to-day basis, but the moments where I excelled. That is my value narrative. And you can believe that I will share that value narrative on my phone screen and in every single live interview. Because what I want to happen is when I walk out the door and everyone who interviewed me sits down to discuss me as a candidate, I want them all to have the same talking points, but not just any talking points, the ones that I created, the ones that I cultivated to best represent my professional successes. This is how we take the ball. This is how we actually have control of what that narrative about us sounds like. And why does that matter? A recruiter's range for salary can be quite wide. In fact, I've seen a range for one position be between $60,000 and $100,000. And they may say the range for this role is between $60,000 and $100,000, depending on the experience of the candidate or the seniority of the candidate. So they've given us this wide range. And the way that they take that wide range and narrow in on an offer number really just comes from their perception of us over time. And that perception, the first place it is set is in this phone screen or in this interview, the first time we answer, so tell me about yourself. And that is why I believe the value narrative is the single most valuable negotiation tool we have. And you can believe I make sure it is seen and heard everywhere. As I mentioned, it's on the phone screen, in the interview. I may reference it in the offer and counteroffer, which we'll walk through later, and in my promotion cycle. I also want it to be publicly visible. I'm going to put it at the top of my resume. So if you don't read my entire resume, at minimum, I know you're reading the best highlights I've got. So, next step, head over to your My Value Narrative worksheet and fill out each section so you can build your value narrative that you'll use in your next and every single interview you step into.